from a fallout shelter somewhere under Seattle, Washington. It's the show you've been waiting for. Get ready to join your hosts, John and Kenric, as they talk comics, movies, and more. Now here's Spoiler Country!
Alright, welcome back to Spoiler Country. I'm Kenric, and that right there is Mr. Horsley. And today on the show, well, it's another interview with our man on the street, Casey Allen.
That's right. Talking with Mr. Frank Gogol and his new book, Dead End Kids.
Yeah, it's like Stand By Me meets the Hardy Boys.
That's what I've heard. And it just came out, too. Source Point Press just released it.
Nice. So this is not a Kickstarter. This is a book you can go and buy right now.
Yeah, there'll be a link in the show notes. You can go click on it, go to Source Point Press, and pick it up right away.
Nice. And Frank has a website, frankgogol.com, and you can find out more about his work, and he's got a blog on there, and he talks about his comics and everything. So, yeah,
he's a really fun guy to talk to too. He sent us over a preview copy of the book, and I took a look through it. And it's pretty fun.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. I haven't checked it out yet. I haven't had a chance.
Yeah, it's in our email if you want to look at it.
Yeah, it's exciting. Cool. Yeah. Well, let's check it out.
All right, cool.
I'm gonna go ahead and pull the cord on this thing. Today, I am talking to Frank Gogol. This is Casey Allen. The other voice you've been hearing so far is Frank Gogol. Frank is the writer of the new book, Dead End Kids. He also has another book by Source Point Press called Grief, which is a really, really well-done anthology about the 7 stages of grief. Frank, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's Thursday, so we're almost there, and I'm talking to you, so it could be worse.
Hey man, that's a good outlook. So yeah, man. Okay, can we get into Dead End Kids a little bit?
Yeah, as long as we don't do it like the dolphin did it.
Oh man, that things got dark.
Well, it's a dark book.
Do you think that Flipper just secretly wanted to fuck all those kids?
Flipper is a pretty promiscuous sounding name. What was he flip? I watched that movie. I didn't see him do one flip. So what was it? You wouldn't call a person arm, right? So it obviously wasn't a reference to his flippers.
He was faster than lightning.
Yeah, well, look, if he was up to no good, what do you think Free Willy was up to no good? He had that crooked fin and everything.
Free Willy, that that movie.
More like Freak Willy.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm never gonna get a job. Never.
You're gonna sit down at your laptop later, getting ready to write another book, and you're just like, dolphin boners.
You know what?
That's all I can think about.
The next book I'm writing is a comedy, so maybe it'll help. But I'm definitely writing Marvel or Valiant or anyone who matters.
So, Dead End Kids, where did you get the inspiration for that?
It really came from 2 places. About a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit more now that I've been telling the story for a while, I turned 30 years old. And like many people, when they turn 30, they start to sort of look back on their lives a little bit. And I started to get a little bit nostalgic for when I was growing up and, hanging out with my friends and building clubhouses in the woods and staying out way past the streetlights going off and getting in trouble. And so I was sort of, intrigued and thinking about that kind of stuff. And the other thing is this sort of deep-seated love-hate relationship I have with coming-of-age stories. Excuse me. The coming-of-age story format is sort of, it's some kid has a problem, and then he meets this other group of kids, and they all sort of take care of one another, and they all kind of fix one another. And then at the end of the summer, after everyone's fixed, everyone sort of parts ways and goes on and grows up. I'll never forget the first time I watched Stand By Me, which is one of my favorite movies. But at the end, you find out you get this sort of black and white montage with the pictures and the text saying what happened to all the kids. And the one that you like the most, who had the most working against him, you find out he grew up to be this really successful lawyer, and then tries to break up at a fight at a McDonald's and gets stabbed in the neck and dies. And it's just this really tragic and sad and over the top thing. But the thing that really stung me was that these kids, after they go through this like sort of life-changing summer and spending time together and having one another, they sort of grew up and grew apart. And that was very much not my experience growing up. The kids I grew up with all are still very much part of my life. One of them is the best man in my wedding this September. So like that whole idea of like growing up and going apart never really rung true for me. So when I started to get nostalgic and decided I wanted to write a coming of age story, I really wanted to write it to that experience that I knew, and I suspect a lot more people know, especially sort of in this day and age. People in my age range in their early 30s grew up with the internet and have mostly had it. So it's a lot easier to stay connected than it used to be. Like I live in San Francisco now, and the friend I mentioned lives in New Jersey, and my other groomsman, who's my brother, he lives down in Orlando, and I talk to those guys every single day. Like, and we're thousands and thousands of miles away from one another. So it's just, it's kind of like how the Tom Holland Spider-Man is a Spider-Man for like a millennial audience, a very technological driven audience. This is a coming of age story for a 90s kid. It's our time to have one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. While you were talking earlier, you kind of made me think of it.
Yeah, I know.
No, at the end of the Goonies when the kid gets his inhaler and tosses it.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. He can definitely not. He still has.
That could have been the coda to the end of that story if they would have gone that route and said like, oh well, Chunk opened up a bakery with his new friend Sloth. Data ended up becoming a tech billionaire.
An inhaler kid died as soon as the camera.
He walked by a bush that fucked him up, and then he died.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I was at the soccer field the other day. I don't even have allergies that I know of. I walked by a tree, ruined my entire next 2 days. It was awful.
That's why I moved to the West Coast, man. There's no allergies out here. We went out west for the tech jobs. And
when you guys end up in the sea, in the ocean, I will, I will be glad I didn't heed the call.
I'll take that quick death of a slow one with clogged nostrils and unable to breathe.
I mean, we have tornadoes and all that other shit out here, but you don't have to worry about dying from an Earth that wants to bury us.
Yeah, we all gotta die someday, right?
Oh yeah, something's gonna take us out. So, Dead End Kids. That's your second book with SourcePoint, huh?
It is. Grief came out last year, and it re-came out. Grief was originally a Kickstarter back in 2017. It was digital only. I didn't sort of know how to do printing or any of that stuff yet, and I really wanted to put a comic out there and just to do something. So I put Grief together. It was a really successful Kickstarter. I think we had probably close to 300 backers and like doubled, maybe almost tripled the goal, and like it was a pretty good way to come out the gate for me. And then, interestingly enough, SourcePoint picked it up without me knowing. Somebody else submitted it on my behalf.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I was at New York Comic Con in 2017. After I put Grief out, I started going to cons and networking, and I went up to the SourcePoint booth to introduce myself, like I was doing to all the other publishers. And I was talking to Travis McIntyre, the editor-in-chief. He's if you've ever seen him, or anyone listening ever does see him, he kind of looks like Tormund from Game of Thrones. He's sort of a big, burly guy. He's got a crazy red beard. For a long time, he had a big red mane of hair. So I'm talking to him, and he's kind of rough around the edges. And, I'm like, I walk up and introduce myself and say, hi, I'm Frank Gogol. I'm a comic book writer. And I'm, just walking around to the publishers, introducing myself. And we're talking for a bit, and then he kind of cocks his head and looks at me. He's like, what did you say your name was? It's like, Frank Gogol. He's like, oh yeah, I just read your book. I was like, I think you've got me confused with somebody else, Travis. I didn't submit anything to you. He's like, no, Grief, we're going to pick it up. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I thought that I had misheard him. I was sure I misheard him. So I just kept going, like having conversation with him, and, you know, said goodbye and walked away. And for about the next 20, 25 minutes, I walked around, you know, the Javits Center in New York with thousands and thousands of comic book fans and cosplayers and whatnot, thinking I had had some kind of a psychotic break. But the truth of the matter is, Andy Schmidt, who was my writing mentor and used to edit at Marvel and runs the Comics Experience School, had submitted the book on my behalf because he thought it was good, thought it deserved a shot, and it worked out. So that came out last April in print, and I've been sort of traveling all over the country with SourcePoint most weekends during con season, selling the book. And actually, just 2 weeks ago at Denver Comic Con, it officially sold out at the distributor level. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, there are a handful of copies floating around. I know I've got about 30 myself, and there's a few others sort of in pockets all over the country with SourcePoint creators. But for all intents and purposes, the original print run's done, and like not a moment too soon, because Dead End Kids comes out like about a month from now, like a month from next Wednesday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like I would have been doing conventions with nothing to sell. I'm on the schedule for like San Diego, and it would have been really hard to go to San Diego and not have anything to do. But yeah, so I did grief with them. Really have a really strong relationship. I work with them a lot, and I pitched Dead End Kids at the beginning of this year, and like they picked it up and they fast tracked it, and it's going to come out in like 4 weeks. So
this is a lot different narratively than what you did with your last book. How did that go? Did you enjoy changing it up a little bit?
Yeah. I'm a pretty firm believer that like writing or sort of any endeavor that you have to try and get better at is exactly that. It's like going to the gym. Like if you want to bench 300 pounds and you're, you know, pre-super soldier serum Steve Rogers skinny, you're going to have to start at the bottom. You're going to have to start with like a 5-pound weight, lift it until you can do that, then level up to a 10-pound weight, and then 50 and 100 and so on until you can bench 300. And that's always sort of been my mentality and approach to writing comics. I started off writing 5-page short stories and 1-page short stories. But you know, at some point I you know, got really comfortable and, you know, to toot my own horn and not mean to, good at it. And the first script took me weeks to write, and the last script in Grief, I think I wrote in one sitting and didn't have to edit it. So like, you know, I'd gotten comfortable and stronger in that regard. And since then I had written, some one shots and stuff that are sort of still in production at different levels. But I slowly worked up. Like I wanted to tell this story for a little while, and I've wanted to tell sort of miniseries for a little while, but I knew that if I tried to, it wouldn't be good enough because I hadn't built the foundation and worked my way up and earned it. So in terms of like the different narrative, I mean, it's night and day. Telling a story over 3 issues versus telling a story in 5 pages is a wildly different experience. Honestly, telling a 5-page story is harder than telling a 3-issue story. Sort of getting a beginning, middle, and end in like a very small real estate and have it still be satisfying.
You have to cut all that fat out. Yeah.
I think the greatest compliment I ever got about Grief was that Action Comics 1000 was essentially an anthology of Superman stories from some of the greatest creators in the world. And like Jeff Johns is in there. I think Jeff Loeb had a story. Brian Bendis had a story. Dan Jurgens. And I read the book and I thought it was okay, but you know, somebody came up to me and said, you know, not one of those stories really resonated and really, you know, worked in a short space. But for whatever reason, you were able to tell 10 good stories in a few pages each in Grief, and it's, you know, it says a lot about what you'll be able to do down the road. And that's always sort of stuck with me. And like, I definitely don't necessarily agree. I think all those guys are legends and they're doing amazing work, and they're, you know, they're the guys I want to be. But for somebody to say that and think that like really meant the world to me. So like when it came time to do Dead End Kids, in terms of like, you know, getting the story on paper, I'd say it was honestly a little bit easier. I think I wrote the first draft in about 8 days. And then I think I probably had the final draft within 2 months of starting to write it, which I think is pretty quick. Maybe it's a really bad book. I don't know.
Everybody has their own way of going about things, and especially in regards to the source material. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but sometimes it just, you can just, shut everything off except, your brain and your fingers, and just knock it out. And that's such a good feeling when you can actually see the progress as, in real time, and it's you don't feel like you're banging your head up against a wall.
Absolutely. Like, and if I could, give some unsolicited advice to anyone who wants to write or is writing, who's listening, there are absolutely two things that have helped me become a stronger, faster, better writer over the last 3 years. One of them is micro installments. If you're looking down the barrel of 100-page, graphic novel, that probably seems like a really intimidating, hurdle to get over. But if you start thinking about it differently, it's 1 page a day for 100 days, which is just 3 months, or 2 pages a day for 50 days, which is just under 2 months, it becomes a much more manageable project. The other thing is it's 3 things really. That first thing, the second thing is just being agile, getting it done. Don't worry about whether it's good. Just put it down on paper, because if you have a draft, you can go back and fix it. But if you don't have a draft, you can't fix anything. And you have nothing to work on, and you're still stuck where you were. So do the work, be agile about it, and don't worry about how good it is, because that first draft of Dead End Kids that I wrote in 8 days was full of cliche scenes and unrefined dialogue, and but it got me over that first hurdle, and then I could take a page or 2 a day or a scene a day and revise it and get it to where I wanted to, and then eventually I had a finished script that I enjoyed and thought was good enough to move on to production.
And that's, so going back, I've known you for a few years now. And one thing that really impressed me with your take on writing is that, so the way I normally do things, I normally go about things very, shoot from the hip, go, do it, take it as it comes. You went to that thing like it was a job, even when it wasn't your job, and you made it your job. And so that always impressed me. I remember you posted a graph of your productivity at writing for the and I was thinking to myself, holy shit, this guy is driven. And so there's, when people can actually affect change and do something, it's because A, they're talented in what they're trying to do, and B, they're busting their ass. And so you can't get something done without both of those things working at the same time.
Sure.
You can be talented and the most talented writer in the world, but if you don't push yourself and put your work out there, nobody's going to see it. You can be the most driven person in the world, but if you type up dog shit every day, nobody's going to want to read it. And so when you have somebody like a Frank Gogol that is going at it hard 7 days a week and putting it down on the page and making it happen, then, well, I mean, basically I'm just kind of waiting for you to announce what your third book with SourcePoint is going to be, or what your next project is going to be, because there's not really any doubt in my mind that that's going to happen sometime soon.
Well, I can tell you this much. All of my books through almost the end of 2022 are already written.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Not necessarily, they're not all greenlit, but I know in my gut that they're better than what's come before, so I'm not too worried about it. And I could probably even tell you the pitch for the next one that's not announced yet. It's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer was like a big influence on my writing and just in my pop culture love in general. And I always wanted to sort of do my take on it. So it's Buffy as a recovering drug addict, taking on sort of the Lost Boys as a gang of drug dealing vampires. And I don't know, the sort of the tagline that'll go with it is drugs, vampires, and punk rock.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I was looking at
that sounds like a super fun project.
I was looking at some of the pages for it today. The first issue's almost done. This one will be tentatively next spring into early next summer. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I also have a few things coming to Kickstarter next year that I can talk about because, they're my own.
Well, hit us up, man.
Yeah.
What?
We got 3 things tentatively coming to Kickstarter, 2 for sure. The first is a book called Suburbia Robotica, which is one of those one-shots I mentioned a little bit ago. It is sort of a modern take on Pinocchio, but with robots. It's a sort of exploration of like why somebody would want to build themselves a son, and what kind of darker motivations somebody might have for that. And we've got some really sort of, I wanted to make this one look really interesting and sort of be almost like subverting expectations with the art. So we have like almost a cartoony art, similar to like a Scotty Young on it. So like, I haven't seen the last pages yet, but everything I've seen right now is really like, oh, it looks so cute. And then it's like this grotesquely dark book at times. And I think the people are going to be a little bit surprised by it, but I think they'll like it as well. I've got another book that I've been working on for a very long time with Sonia Kinsey, who Cow Loves Clover.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is it's called After the Storm, which I think will be the final title. The book is all drawn and lettered, and I'm still just sort of working out some of the design stuff on it. But essentially, it is a drama, memoir-esque type book set vaguely after the events of Hurricane Sandy in 2012. It's never mentioned in the story, but that's definitely what it is. And Hurricane Sandy was something that deeply affected my life and my family's life. I grew up on the Jersey Shore. So this is sort of the story of what happens after the camera crews leave and they move on to the next natural disaster. If I'm not mistaken, there was a tornado almost immediately after Hurricane Sandy in Oklahoma or Kansas. And that was on the news immediately. And then nobody was paying attention to all the places hit by Hurricane Sandy anymore. But what I saw sort of in the aftermath of that, after people stopped watching it, was a lot of community and a lot of struggle and stuff like that. And I felt like it never got talked about. So I wanted to tell this story of what it looked like. But it's also the story of a woman who's recently lost her husband and sort of how those two things dovetail and affect her as she's going through them both at the same time. That one, like I said, is done by Sonia. So the art is it's Jeff Lemire inspired, I like to say. It's watercolors and sort of inky. It's a good looking book. And
her page composition is fantastic. She's a really incredible artist. And sometimes she'll turn in a page and it looks like something from an illuminated manuscript. It's just the 100%. Colors are so beautiful, and the lettering that she uses is just fantastic. Yeah.
So for this, we went for more of a straightforward look. It's mostly rectangle panels or square panels. But what really where she shines on this, and this is something I hadn't seen a whole lot of in her work prior to this, is the facial expressions on some of the scenes are just hauntingly human. And the watercolors and the way she was able to shade with it, and it's a really good looking book.
She's like you in that, how I was talking earlier about how I see you, pushing yourself in your writing and everything. Yeah. Her ass is out there,
drawing every day at the museum or whatever, drawing bones of something in Germany that died, hundreds of years ago. And that's on top of getting her PhD. Yeah. So you talk to her and you just feel like a big dum-dum, really. I mean... it's pretty wild. Usually I'm the one who's on top of everything, waiting. She was turning in pages faster than I could look at them for her. to my regret, I made her wait a long time for feedback on some of the pages because I didn't expect them so soon, and like they came in while I was doing other projects. But yeah, so we've got that book coming, and it's going to be really cool. And we're going to try something cool with the format. Do something a little bit bigger that's not entirely a comic book. Some back matter that's really interesting.
Oh, cool.
So we'll see how that goes. And then the third project is it's called The Farm. It is another one shot. It is sort of a late golden age, sort of end of the golden era Hollywood slasher set in the sort of Sunset Boulevard area of Hollywood. And this is just something like, it was an idea I got. Like I like slasher movies, and you know they sort of go back as far as like the 60s. Like, you know, you got like Texas Chainsaw has some back history in it that like goes back to like the 60s, and then in the 70s you get sort of Michael Myers, in the 80s you get Freddy Krueger and Jason. But I sort of wanted to push the envelope back a little bit because I think the 50s are like really interesting time in America. It's the end of the golden age of Hollywood, like I said. And I thought it was just sort of like, you know, a Scream is a favorite of mine. So I wanted to sort of not tell my own version of Scream, but really sort of have that love letter to Hollywood. I'm working with a really cool artist named Amin Rafet, who's I believe is an Egyptian Brit. And he's just got this sort of like noir style.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. And these, you know, we haven't started yet, but the conversations we had, you know, so far just have been around like giving it this really sort of desaturated, off light brown kind of grainy feel, almost like an old Hollywood film before color. And I think that just based on everything he's done and based on the script, I think that one's, of the three, I think that's going to be the one that interests people the most. So there's plenty of stuff coming, and it's all sort of a little bit different. Like, you know, it's again, like I'm trying to flex the muscles and build different muscles and try new things.
I hear you. That's awesome. And you're not going to develop as a writer by staying in the same place.
Yeah. No.
So yeah. And you know, I was thinking about, again, going back to grief, I was thinking about the difference between grief and Dead End Kids, and it almost seems like grief was immensely more taxing to write, because you're having to stick, not only you're having to stick to a theme, but you stayed very true to the idea of like, oh, each chapter is the 7 stages of grief. And you had to tell it while also telling a story that is fulfilling to read.
You know, I don't know. It's definitely taxing for reasons that had to do with like me being a novice writer and a new writer. You know, and writing is, you know, for all the big game I talk about, like how easy it is. It's still work. But you know, the truth is, it's sort of in my DNA as a storyteller to like the stages of the grieving process are sort of my template for life in a weird way. Like I had a really garbage childhood, and like the first 19 years of my life were just like a constant like downward roller coaster. Like just imagine being at the top and then you go down and your stomach's always thrown, like just for like 19 years. And like, you know, there's a lot of really personal stories in that collection, especially the story called Prayer. I think it's the 5th or 6th chapter. Like that's almost like a straight autobiography of my life. But
I think I remember that one. Yeah,
it's a straight drama about a mother who's a recovering drug addict who doesn't have any money to get her kid a birthday present, and she thinks she's going to relapse because she's stressed out. And yeah, I don't want to ruin the ending for anyone who's never read it, but it's, you know, that is literally a situation that's out of my life. But you know what? Like the truth about it is, like I've just been sort of by like almost like a contact high, like for lack of a better word, or osmosis even. Like I absorbed so much story in my life already. Like every episode of Buffy has immensely affected my storytelling, and a handful of them have like truly influenced my storytelling. But I'm sort of like an OCD person. I like organization and like hierarchies and stuff. Like, it's not like, like I don't need like my crayons all in a row and like color coded, but like I like when they're organizing principles, and the idea that there were 5 stages of the grieving process, or 7 stages or 9 stages or whatever version, sort of you subscribe to. When I learned about that, like, it really put a lot of stuff in perspective for me. I think I was about 19 so it was the Jeff Loeb Fallen Sun miniseries at Marvel. Captain America was killed, and Jeff Loeb did a series of 5 one-shots, each one of them dealing with one of the stages of the grieving process. And like, after I read that, I did a whole bunch of research, and like this really, like, I ingested this idea and made it part of me, because I had just been through so much at that point, and not had any sort of sense of what the process for dealing with it was. Like, I dealt with a lot of it, and I dealt with it very badly. And some of it I hadn't dealt with. And like, just this idea that there's this template I could follow to do it in a more healthy way, even if it wasn't like 100% true, like, that really stuck with me. So when I was writing Grief, like, the truth is I didn't write Grief. I wrote 10 short stories, and they became Grief. I was just trying different things, like writing a drama, writing a sci-fi story, writing a magic story. And at some point after I'd written 5 or 6 of them, I printed them out and laid them out on my office floor and sort of looked at them and moved them around, put them side by side, and switched spots with other stories to sort of see what I was missing. Like, I wanted to know the story, sort of see where I had to go next. And as I was doing this, I realized, this is acceptance, and this is depression, and this is anger. And I started to realize that I was following this template without even realizing it. So from there on, like the last 5 or 4 stories, I made a more purposeful effort to tackle sort of some of the holes in it and make sure that there were, a story for each stage, and then there's some stuff in between. So, in that way, it was taxing, because it was therapeutic on some level. It was reflective. It made me dig deep and think about some stuff that I thought was sort of a done deal. Like, my mom passed away when I was 19, after a very sort of tumultuous, on and off relationship with drugs, and not having custody of me for a long time, and being in and out of my life. And when I started writing comics 3 years ago, I was in my late 20s. It had been 10 years, and I thought I had sort of dealt with it, and things had been okay. But as I was writing some of these stories, especially that one I just mentioned, Prayer, like, things started to bubble back to the surface, and I realized I hadn't dealt with things, and that there was still sort of more emotional work to do in that regard. And writing these stories really helped me work through a lot of that. And this is sort of a long answer to answer your question that it was a little taxing.
And one thing I also noticed is it seems that with Dead End Kids, different subject matter altogether, but I don't think that you're any less emotionally involved with this story. And it's, I think, in order to write something that is believable, even if you're writing Spider-Man, you have to have some type of emotional connection to those characters. And it always impresses me when people kind of push that forward. Like Leah Williams recently was talking on Twitter about her writing Gwenpool and her connection to that character, because people were kind of wanting to pull the whole backseat driver shit on her and tell her how to write. And her respect for the character, wouldn't allow her to capitulate to those demands, because that's not who that character is. And so finding that emotional connection rather to that character is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's I mentioned that the first, or maybe I didn't mention this yet, I've done a few podcasts recently, like 50. But the first story I ever wrote was called Embrace. It was a 5-page short story about a father and his autistic son, and the dad is trying to teach the son how to tie shoes, and it's not going well, and it goes really badly actually. And like as you're reading the story, you sort of realize that this is just one day in their life, and I think I try to, like, when I talk about story, my big thing is like a cool concept will get somebody to pick up issue 1. Like, you know, if you're like, you know, and spoilers for my future pitch for a Dark Avengers book, but if you're like Sentry and Moon Knight and Namor are on a team and it's the Dark Avengers, you know, you got your Aquaman parallel, you got your Superman parallel, and you got your Batman parallel, but they're all arrogant or crazy. You know, this is the powder keg Justice League, and you know, throw in friggin' Titana as Wonder Woman and Quicksilver as the Flash. Like, you have these really messed up and dark and like really aggressive people who are supposed to be like these parallels of the Justice League. You know, that's a great concept and might get somebody to pick up the book, but if like by the end of issue 1 you don't give a shit about those characters you're reading about, you're definitely not coming back for issue 2. And like I said, I come from the Joss Whedon Buffy the Vampire Slayer school of storytelling. One of the best episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer has absolutely no monsters in it. It's called The Body. It's about Buffy finding her mom dead on the couch one day, and just, you know, that episode is honestly a straight drama, and you are invested in the character and you feel for her. And even if you've never lost a parent, like, you can relate on some level to what loss feels like. Even if you lost a pet or lost a job or lost a relationship or lost your favorite yo-yo, like, you can understand loss, and that human connection allows you to feel sympathy for the characters, and you want to see what happens to them. You hope they don't go through the ringer, and you hope things get better, but you're sort of invested in the ride either way. And that's sort of why I focused on character-only stories rather than, you know, capes and tights and magic when I first started writing. And when I develop stories now, I try to – it's always about the character first. Like, I always think of something I want to see happen to a character, some change or some situation that I want them to struggle with, and then I wrap, you know, a murder mystery around that, or a superhero story around that, or, you know, a magic story. But you know, if you don't start with that like essential sympathetic character, like, I'm not really sure why you're telling the story. Like, it's the difference between telling The Godfather and Transformers by Michael Bay. Like, yeah, like Don Corleone is like an evil fucking guy. And like, but he's interesting enough that you pay attention. But when Al Pacino's character comes in and you see him as like the sort of distant, wanting to stay on the outside of this very evil organization, you know, you feel sympathy for him and you feel like his righteousness. And then, like, as you watch him essentially literally devolve into becoming the devil, you know, you're still invested. Like, you still like this guy at the end of the story, even though he's literally just like ordered the murder of people. And I don't know, like, I'm rambling. I could talk all day about story.
So
yeah, yes, the answer is yes, I think.
As someone who never finished The Godfather,
so, spoilers.
Did he get the Allspark at the end?
In a way. In a way.
Yeah, dude, I'm so far behind. Is that if you're from Jersey, is that a film you have to see?
I mean, it's set in Staten Island, so not really. And the whole, you know, myth that Jersey is very Italian is sort of like a mass, like, slander campaign, if you ask me.
Oh, for
little geography lesson. New Jersey is a tall state. It's kind of like it would fit in a tall rectangle, not comfortably, but it's essentially a taller than wide state, unlike most of the Midwest. And it has 3 sections, whether anyone wants to admit it or not. There's North Jersey, there's South Jersey, and there's Central Jersey. People from North Jersey tend to have sort of New Yorker accents and a little more gruff to them. It's a more urban part of the state. People from South Jersey are a little slower with a little bit of a drawl, kind of like a Southern accent, and they're a little bit closer to Philly. People in Central Jersey, like myself, sort of lack accent. I read a study once that people from sort of where I grew up, Monmouth County, New Jersey, have like exactly zero accent and pronounce most words according to how they're supposed to be pronounced, like via the dictionary. So that's your little linguistics lesson. But most people from where I come from aren't Italian, and most people from South Jersey are Italian, and just a handful of really loud people from North Jersey are Italian. Like, seriously, like in defense of New Jersey, like here we go. We have lakes and beaches and mountains, and most of the state is farms, and most people don't realize that. Like it's called the Garden State for a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
And one TV show and a couple movies have sort of defined for all of pop culture and people on Earth what New Jersey is. But where are you from again? You're somewhere sort of south?
Birmingham, Alabama. Which
Okay.
So a few years ago, the
like
governor.
you guys talked about expectations. Bad example. No. Okay.
We catch a lot of shit, and specifically, like the governor of Pennsylvania said that he compared Pennsylvania to Alabama in that he said that, you know, Pennsylvania is a state. We have Pittsburgh, we have Philly, and then that's surrounded by Alabama. To which
Kentucky.
exactly, yeah. So I want to get mad, but having driven through rural Pennsylvania, I kind of see what he's talking about. Yeah.
I don't know, like it's kind of wild to me, but most states, and we're wildly off topic now, but most states have like rural areas, and they're all fairly similar. Like, you know, it's lower and middle class people living probably pretty close to the poverty line, and you know, not having a whole ton of culture access. And this isn't a knock at them. This is just sort of how I recognize the reality. Like, you know, there aren't museums and you know, out where there are farms, there aren't musicals and plays and you know, big entertainment type things. And like, I get that. But yeah, and then you have the cities. You know, you've got your San Francisco, where I live. You've got your Mobile, and you've got your, you know, Trenton in New Jersey and Pittsburgh and all the ones you mentioned, and they're a little more populated. There's a little bit more going on. Things are a little faster. I think, like, you know, the differences between us aren't so great as they seem. And that there isn't a whole lot different going on from one place to the next in this country. And I'm not sure like where that idea comes from, but I digress.
So
that's not what we're going to talk about.
So when this book comes out,
yeah,
how will it be coming out, man? Is it going to be going into comic shops? Is it going to be direct order? How do you distribute this book?
Yeah. All right. So let me sort of start at the beginning. I haven't actually said the pitch for the book. So Dead End Kids is a 3-issue miniseries about 3 kids in the late 90s trying to solve their friend's murder. It's, think like Stand By Me meets the Hardy Boys, but more violent. So at its core, it's a story of 4 kids who all come from sort of fucked up households and are messed up, and they all find one another, and in one another they sort of find this stability and friendship. And this is the story of what happens when that stability is ripped away because one of the kids is murdered, and the other kids start to sort of spiral. So like I said, it's a 3-issue miniseries. It's going to be published and distributed by Source Point Press. It'll come out through Diamond, so it'll be in comic shops.
Nice.
The first issue drops on July 24th. That was in the Diamond catalog for May. The second issue is in the Diamond catalog for June, so it's the current catalog. That comes out August 21st. And the third issue will be in solicits for September, which come out next week. So I don't know the date on that. But the order code for issue 1 is May 1908, MAY 191908. And the order code for number 2 is June 1916, JUN 191916. So I imagine the one for number 3 will be something to the effect of JUL 1919 something. But we'll see. But yeah, the FOC on issue 1 is past now. I do know that the print run is going to exceed the orders, so it'll be available for free orders Anyone who gets their order in by like the first week of July for number 1 should be able to get a copy on the day it comes out. Or if they're not able to do it by then, it'll come to them. They'll get a first print copy maybe a week or 2 after the initial drop of the first issue. So yeah, it's going to come out through Diamond. It's coming out through SourcePoint Press through Diamond via SourcePoint Press. And it'll be 3 issues.
That's huge. That's awesome. So, dude, I'm so excited for you. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we start slowing things down?
Regarding the book, I mean, I could talk all day about almost anything, apparently. If you like coming of age stories, if you like Stand By Me, The Breakfast Club, Sandlot, Stranger Things without monsters, but you dig like sort of things that turn concepts like that on their heads, sort of deviate from the accepted path, might have a few twists and turns you're not expecting. I think this might be a book for you, and it's only three issues, so it's not like a huge financial commitment for anyone. It's not Doomsday Clock. It's not going to cost you $50 by the time it's all done. Actually, Doomsday Clock's going to cost $60. Those issues are $5 each. But for 10 or $12, you can take a chance on an indie book and see something that you haven't seen before and isn't a boring old superhero book with some nondescript acronym organization doing the same thing it did 10 years ago. Looking at you, Hydra.
So, all right, man. You're doing the indie thing. Do you have any plans for the big 2? If the big 2 came up to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, this is in my fictional reality where the big 2 are one singular entity,"
sure.
What would you want to take on? Like, what's the thing that you just, I have this story in my brain, it needs to come out?
All right. Well, to answer your question very literally, if they came up to me tomorrow, I would tell them no. I don't think I'm ready. But so let's say this is 5 years down the line. I've had a few minis come out. I'm like a much stronger writer than I am now. I've definitely had, I keep a notebook full of pitches for when the day comes. So I definitely have some stuff that's warm and ready to go. Like I said, I pitched that Dark Avengers book. I would love to do sort of this dark take on the Justice League using Marvel characters that are sort of the analogs of the classic Justice League members. And it just so happens that those characters would be like this huge powder keg. So that would be like my dream team book. And I think it'd be different enough that, it could stand out. There's a couple characters I'd like to tackle for sure. Hawkeye's my favorite character of all time. And I feel like he just doesn't get this is a dude who runs with the God of Thunder and a super soldier. And all he is a bow and arrow. He is probably the most insane and capable Avenger of all of them. And he needs a little respect. So I'd love to tackle him. I've got a pretty good Iron Fist pitch I'd like to do. It's sort of like Mortal Kombat meets Iron Fist. And Brubaker and Faction got into that a little bit, and they did some really cool stuff. But I've got a little bit of a different angle on it, and I think this could work. I would very much like to write one issue of Black Panther. Black Panther's another character that really sticks to me, but I sort of recognize that there are other voices who could tell that story and probably have more right to tell that story than me. So if somebody wanted to throw me a one-shot or like a mini story in like an annual or something, I'd be very grateful for that, and I'd do my very best because it's a character I love. But like I said, I don't want to take that opportunity away from a person of color who can tell a more authentic and true story than I can, and I'm fine with that. But if somebody gave me the opportunity, I would do my best to do my best. You know what I mean? I don't know that I would pitch anything to DC. I didn't get into DC until the New 52 rolled around. I was pretty overwhelmed by how much history there was there and sort of how many characters there were that I didn't know a lot about. So when the New 52 rolled around, as much as people didn't like it, it was a pretty good jumping on point. I was able to get into Superman and Batman, and I was already reading Green Lantern. I think that was the one book I read from DC. But now I know who the Fourth World characters are. I know who the Legion of Superheroes are, and the Justice Society, stuff like that. But I don't know that I have character I'd want to pitch for.
Well, don't worry. Dr. Manhattan's done stuck his big blue dick and all that, so you might know who those people are.
Just like a dolphin.
Exactly. Going back. Fucking Peter the Dolphin. So anyway, you guys, the Dolphin Who Loved Me, coming out by Source Point Press. Author Frank Gogol.
The spy book. It's 007, The Dolphin Who Loved Me. Or 069, The Dolphin Who Loved Me. I don't know.
That's your next one shot, man.
Yeah.
So, Dead End Kids, July 24th, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. You guys go to your LCS, pick up Dead End Kids. If they don't have it, demand it. This book has to be read. Frank is on top of his game, and I can't wait to see this book. I can't wait to get my hands on this book, and I can't wait to see what Frank comes up with next. So, Frank, thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if I could just pimp one last thing for anyone who's listening and will be at San Diego Comic-Con, the date of San Diego Comic-Con is the week before Dead End Kids #1 comes out. And if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, you may or may not, I can't confirm or deny, have an opportunity to snag a copy of the first issue with maybe an exclusive variant cover by maybe the Tomb Raider artist from Dark Horse, Phil Seavey, who's a buddy of mine, and some really cool prints and some pins and some shit. I don't know, there might be a cool little package thing going on. So if the book sounds interesting to you, I would definitely maybe go buy the Source Point Press table at San Diego Comic-Con. Just maybe.
I think that you need to have a body outline in front of your table.
It's a long show. There might actually be one.
Somebody might have a mechanical pencil, and that shuts down Hall H, so who knows?
Hey, you never know, man. But I do have a can of white spray paint, somewhere in my garage, I'm sure.
Frank, thanks for coming on. And you guys, Dead End Kids, pick it up.
Okay, well, we're back.
We're back, yeah. And as always, I want to thank Casey for taking the time to do the interviews that you don't have time to do because of time schedules and stuff like that. But I always love hearing his questions because he always comes up with stuff we don't think of. Because I usually just go for the conversation. He asks questions, which is nice.
Yeah. It always makes me laugh because in my head, I see Casey sitting down at a desk with his microphone, and for some reason, I don't know if he wears glasses or not.
He does,
reading glasses, but he's puts on his glasses, he adjusts in his chair, he turns his coffee cup a little bit slightly just to have it just so, and then he has a stacks of paper, and because sometimes you hear paper rustling, so I always imagine him just flipping through his paper, asking questions.
I don't think you're too far off there. I mean, I think you're pretty accurate on what he does.
That's funny. And Frank seems like a cool guy. So hopefully we can have him on for some more of his other work that comes out as they come along.
Yeah, it'd be fun to do just an actual hangout with him too, just to get him on, just chit chat around stuff.
Yeah, because he's done some work with Casey in the past with the Comic Jam.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, so there you guys go. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed what you heard, and if you did like it, go check out at which place can they buy the book?
Source Point Press. They just go to
Source Point Press.
Yep, just Google that. There'll be a link in the show notes as well. If you just search for Dead End Kids comic, it'll come up as well. But there'll be a link in the show notes to go buy it.
Yeah, and as always, if you can't afford it, share it out because people will enjoy it, and then they might find something new.
Exactly.
All right, we're Spoiler Country. We are, of course, heard everywhere podcasts are heard, and we're on all the social medias that matter. And we also have a voicemail.
We do. 707-656-2080. Give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. Tell us your favorite indie booker or your favorite indie author or artist, and we'd love to hear that. We also have an email, spoilercountry@gmail.com. You can email us if you have a book out you want to have us review or you want to have it be on the show and talk to Casey. You can just email us at spoilercountry@gmail.com. We also have a website with reviews and articles and all of our shows up there at scpod.net. There's a lot of fun stuff going there, so check that out for sure.
Yep, and more stuff coming. Some exciting different things. We're just trying to figure out how we want to present it.
Yeah. The best way to rule that out.
Yeah. So, there you guys go. Don't forget to open that mind. Read more. Later.
Yo.
Hey, how's it going, man? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, loud and clear. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Sorry about the delay, man. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they're both very needy. And my 4-year-old was not wanting to go to bed.
It's no problem. I was on a podcast. It's probably almost a month ago now. Comic Central, which is
yeah.
That's Chris and a couple other guys. But Chris, it was just me and Chris solo, none of the other guys. And Chris was watching his 11-month-old daughter. And it was a two-parter, so we recorded one morning and everything was fine. And then the second morning, the daughter was just like wide awake and just screaming. And like we had to stop and record a few times and like do things over. And at some point, I just started working her into it. Like I would complain about something and then she would cry. And then I would say, I really agree with you, Sloan, or whatever. You got to adapt and be flexible. So it's all good.
We've had to cut my 4-year-old out of a few episodes because she kind of made her presence known in the house. And so, she yelled across the house for me one day to turn on Teen Titans.
Okay.
So,
well, it could have been worse.
Yeah, good taste at least, right?
It could have been porn or Batman versus Superman. I mean, it could have been much worse.
Yeah, I would have to say, kid, I'm not mad that you're going to watch Batman versus Superman. Everybody thought that was going to be awesome. I'm just really disappointed because by now the internet's up and better. I expect better of you.
I hate watched it a second time. I saw it in theaters and just really just disliked it. And then when it came out, I think it was on a plane or something, I watched it again, sort of just turned my brain off and didn't want too much from it. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. Just as a whole, it's a complete dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah.
And Zack Snyder is just not a good director. But there's some good ideas in there. Like, I love the Superman as, like, a Christ figure. And that's all set up in Man of Steel. So, like, it's like this big arc. And then Resurrection and Justice League. Like, I mean, like, there was some thought in there, and I can appreciate that.
Man, I fell asleep during Man of Steel in the theater. And then I fell asleep during Batman vs. Superman at home. Both movies, my wife actually liked Man of Steel, and she gives not one shit about comics or anything at all. I think she just, she's like, I wanted to go to this is how she put it, and I was like, okay, I can't really say anything bad about your thoughts on this. She's like, I went to the theater to see people smash stuff. I went to the theater. I saw people smash stuff. Pretty successful outing. I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I didn't hate Man of Steel. Like, sort of coming on the heels of the Nolan Batman movies, it was pretty disappointing. But, compared to, like, Superman Returns or some of the TV Superman stuff, like, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, the thing that bothered me the most was that he was smashing up Metropolis, man.
Yeah, well, you know what? Like, I sort of talked myself into believing this at this point, but this is a very young Superman. This is sort of like Superman right after the last episode of Smallville. Like, he's finally like in the suit and he's finally like trying, and like he has to snap Zod's neck, and like it's like that moment that firms him up as like this like ultra noble, like will do anything to get the job done right kind of person. And like on some level I like appreciate that. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of Superman stories that push that boundary that we don't talk about because it's not the Superman everyone wants to remember. But I don't know, it kind of made the character a little bit interesting to me. Like the mass destruction and little care for life was sort of like over the top and dumb, and I really liked sort of the reaction to it in Age of Ultron, where like all the Avengers are actively trying to save every person's life, almost as like a response.
Yeah.
I think Man of Steel is a solid B- movie for me. It didn't blow my mind, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as most people thought it was. Batman versus Superman and Justice League were hot messes.
It was, and like I'll go out and say it. Like I've not been a fan of any of the DC films that I've seen. I didn't even like Wonder Woman, and I wanted to.
Yeah, I feel that.
But in all honesty, I think that DC has the better properties, and they should be doing better with what they have. I mean, they're fucking owned by Warner Brothers. I don't know if Warner Brothers needs to take a back seat.
Warner Brothers is a garbage company. I mean, like, they had Harry Potter, which I honestly didn't think Harry Potter was that great, but outside of Harry Potter, they haven't had like a successful multi movie franchise maybe ever.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead. They're probably gonna find some way to chop some of this conversation into the entire edit, which is a-okay, because it's two guys, just talking shit about comics, which is great.
Yeah.
So, but I'm gonna go ahead.
I love DC, by the way. Like, I just want to put that out there in case some DC editors ever. Aquaman is definitely not the worst character ever made. I don't care if he fucks dolphins, like, whatever. Oh, so I said that out loud.
Have you ever? Please tell me you've heard of Peter the Dolphin.
I don't think I have. What is Peter the Dolphin?
Oh my God. Okay, so Peter the Dolphin, he was a real dolphin, and he was involved in a science experiment where in the 60s they were like, okay, dolphins have remarkably similar brains to humans. So maybe one thing that is, the big gap between the two is that I just saw your message. The big gap is they don't live next to one another. And so if we build a house with a big tank in it and we have a human come and train with that dolphin and read to the dolphin, maybe the dolphin will figure out a way to bridge that gap and communicate with humans, right?
Yeah.
So they put this, young scientist lady in the house with this dolphin, and they spent a lot of time together, like too much time. So much so that one day, good old Pete decides to show off little Pete, and he gets a dolphin boner and will not leave her alone. He starts humping her leg, right? While she's trying to read him like Goodnight Moon or some shit, right? In this interview that I read by her, she's like, well, I mean, I had to finish the experiment. He wouldn't leave me alone, so I got shit done. So basically, she jerked off a dolphin.
Huh.
Yeah. You know things are horribly fucked up when the only reaction you can make to that is, huh.
Yeah. Well, look.
I swear to God.
I respect her integrity as a scientist.
Whatever you got to do to get shit done, man. New York Post has an article, as well as The Guardian. I had a sexual relationship with a dolphin is the headline. The dolphin who loved me, the NASA-funded project that went wrong. It went right for somebody in that equation, but
yeah.
So yeah, Pete was a randy boy.
Well, I'm getting lots of story ideas all of a sudden.
And that big juicy DC contract just went out the window.
Well, I'll just write my anti-Aquaman story. Cockwaman.
You just made me spit my water out a little bit.
That's all right. Yeah, the dolphin got the spit too. It's all and I'm done.
So,